Well, welcome to Shop Talk, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well and staying out of the heat. We're going to give it just a few more minutes for folks to get in, but want to go through a couple of housekeeping items. But before I do that, David, I just want to do a quick sound check. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. It's always great when you can hear me. Well, guys, again, welcome to Shop Talk, and this is a monthly webinar that we do 11 out of the 12 months of the year. We will not be doing one next month because everybody's going to be busy with turn. So, but this is an opportunity for the industry to come together, and we really want you guys to utilize this time to not only hear what's being said from our panels, but also to be able to chat with each other. So over on your right-hand side, you'll see an area that you can chat with folks. If you've got any questions for our panel, just go to that Q&A part of the chat and put it there. That way it's easier for me to see it and I can bring it up. Also, if you'd like to come onto the virtual stage and speak with with our panelists, you can also do that by hitting that request to speak button, and then it will take you through a couple of audio video checks that I'm sure you're used to, and we'll bring you onto the stage. Well, David, missed you guys last month on Shop Talk, but it looks like we've got a lot to talk about today.
There is a lot to talk about, and part of this is a little bit of having missed out on last month's Shop Talk, so I apologize for Matthew Berger and I not being able to be participating. We always love to do that, and so let me get going since there's a lot on here. We provided an update to people a number of months ago regarding the White House really kind of focusing on housing. Really started last year. Earlier this year, the White House issued a resident-centered housing challenge, and we accepted that challenge, and I've done a lot of work since that came out, and we started was Foundations for Rental Housing. We engaged with a number of our members, and you will see a number of these things coming out. We held a town hall earlier this week where our president, Sharon Wilson-Janow, hosted a town hall to kind of talk about the work being done here. The idea here really from a White House perspective and why we chose to engage in this is really to kind of tell the message from the industry side, where we think that a lot of what is going on from a White House perspective is very resident focused, and you kind of see things that talk about tenant protections, et cetera. Look, there's a concern from our end that they're not hearing from us. And so we spent a significant amount of time with a number of our members in creating this Foundations for Rental Housing. And there was an email that, if you're a member of NMHC, your organization got an email from NMHC asking for people to sign on. There's really kind of 6 principles, and I didn't share them necessarily here, but they're pretty straightforward, and there's nothing here in which we're going to be grading people. There's nothing here that we're going to be taking them to task for whether they sign on and whether they're following those. These are kind of things that a lot of you are doing anyway, and so we felt to kind of tell our story, this was important for people to hear. And so I encourage everybody's organization. If your organization, I will tell you that the Cardinal Group has already signed on. So there's one of the leading firms within our student housing industry has already signed on to this Foundations for Rental Housing. The number of units being managed by the collective sign-ons is already up to 1.3 million units. It also includes Greystar, who's also a major player within this particular space. So I highly encourage everybody to look at this and really look for people to sign on to that. In addition, as part of an ongoing challenge, we started a rent control coalition. And the reason we did that is, again, from a pure narrative, which has an impact on student housing potentially as well. And that are lots of states, local jurisdictions who are thinking about implementing rent control. And again, the narrative there is important that we wrest that from some of the advocates that are out there looking to ask for rent control to be established. This is the 5 major multifamily groups. Besides NMHC, you have the National Apartment Association, the MBA, home builders, and the realtors. So a number of you may be members of those organizations that I just mentioned, but also look for really kind of messaging around the downside of rent control. So it's important. It really is an important thing that we're working on. Comment letters. Again, if you're a member of NMHC, you got an email from us recently on the FTC and CFPB on resident screening. That comment letter was submitted at the end of last month. So that call to action was already completed, and hopefully if you participate in that as well. But there's a second call to action that we just issued last week, and that has to do with the FHFA request for input on tenant protections. Again, all this comes out of the White House challenge and White House initiatives. And again, it's really important for FHFA to hear from what you all are doing. And a number of you not only are student housing centric, but you also include multifamily as part of that, of your business as well. So it's clearly exceedingly important. If you did not get that, I would certainly look into your spam filters, but it's important for FHFA to hear. We're obviously going to issue a comment letter. We'll do one through a coalition, but also important to hear from you as individual firms as that relates to that as well. Last month, we issued a survey that the results of that, obviously, insurance is a major issue. And I know it's a major issue for all the firms that are on here as well. Know that it's something that is exceedingly important and something that we are raising as a major issue among the agencies, as well as the White House and as well on the Hill. Insurance is a crisis in terms of both cost and access to that. And just be aware that it's something that we have certainly spent a significant amount of time, will be spending significant amount of time raising this as a major issue across the industry, especially for those who operate in jurisdictions that are, whether it's California, Florida, Texas, along the Gulf Coast, which I know there's certainly a lot of student housing properties that fall within those areas. This is an ongoing major issue.
That's a perfect segue into our, not the next segment, but the segment.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'd already mentioned battles on rent control. Again, if you're an NMHC member, you have access to research notes, which we just put out some important information on that as well. I encourage people to look at that as well. And then and in a slightly different tact, over the last 2 months, we put out a DEI guide, and then we also put out an important paper on housing equity, and I would encourage people to look to those. I will fold that comment into our student housing conference, which, Wes, I know you announced that last month when we were didn't have an ability to get on, but we were going to be in Las Vegas from October 17th to the 19th. Registration is open for that. And on the agenda, we actually have both a panel on DEI and we have a panel on ESG as well, which is clearly an important topic as well. And last but not least, a lot of you attend our OpTech conference, which will take place also in Las Vegas. We are very Las Vegas centric right now, and that's going to be from November 1st to the 3rd. Both conferences, if you are going to attend, you have to register in order to get access to a hotel room in either one of those situations. So highly encourage people to register if you want to get access to a hotel room. So with that, a lot of update, but I want to turn that over back to you, Wes, and I'll look forward to hearing about what the other speakers have on their topics today.
One quick question, Dave. Is there an early bird date associated with registration for?
Yeah, so I don't have the exact date, but it runs to kind of the end of August.
Okay. I just launched a poll when we started that of asking who will be attending NMHC Student Housing Conference. We've got 50% that hope to, 33% not this year, and 16% already registered. So
there we go.
There we go. I'm sure once we get through turn, everybody will start registering.
I know I'm going to see Charlie out there.
White. I'll have white T-shirts for you out there. I might throw a jacket on top of it.
Look, Charlie, I actually want one of your white T-shirts. So
we'll do. You know how the athletes after the football games give jerseys away? I'll bring you one. We'll do it. We'll take a photo. It'll be good.
Right. Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Charlie, how are you?
We are thriving, my friend. Always a pleasure. I know this is theoretically the last shop talk of this leasing year, not the last of the year, but I'm excited to talk with the crew today.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, I'm excited about our panel. I was a little scared of, was anybody going to be available? Was anybody going to show up in the middle of July? Because I've got properties that have move out on Saturday. So everybody's kind of getting into full gear, but yeah, a lot of things to talk about as we end up the leasing season and start the new one. So I'm excited about that and excited for today's panel. If I'll go ahead and ask them if they will introduce themselves.
Awesome. I think I'm getting us started with this. I hope the echo isn't back, Wes. So if you can give me a thumbs up, hopefully we're good. Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Poyer. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Peak Made Real Estate and super excited to be here. A few kind of updates about Peak. We have just over 35,000 student beds under contract under our third-party management services today. That includes 2 Peak developments that are delivering for the fall and 2 third-party new developments also delivering for the fall. We are sitting at 90% pre-leased as of this morning, so hoping for a strong finish for the last 7 to 8 weeks of the season. And I know, Wes, you had asked about our development pipeline for next year, and we have 7 new developments slated to kick off leasing for the 2024 year.
Fantastic. Mike.
Thanks, Ashley. Hey, everyone. My name is Mike Kivitz. I'm a regional director with the Price Company. We've got about 70 assets under management, representing about 35,000 student beds. We also have a small multifamily portfolio, about 1,100 units. We did not have any new construction deliveries last year, but we do have 2 new construction deliveries, one in Chapel Hill this year, and another one that's actually a multifamily construction delivery in Nashville on Music Road that we're super excited about. And then looking into the future, we've got a couple of new deliveries penciled for 2026 that we are looking forward to.
I love it. I love it. So my name is Alyssa Craneri. I am with Book and Ladder. I'm our AVP of sales. So I am all of our leasing and sales of all of our properties in our portfolio. We have student and multifamily. We have some exciting things going on as well as we keep on growing. We're going to be closing on a few new student housing properties in the very near future. So our bed count just keeps on increasing, as well as the fact that we are going to be diving into third-party management. So some really exciting things across our portfolio. In total, we'll have about 26 properties that we have, and we're just continuing to keep on growing. So it's a very exciting time at Book and Ladder, and very happy to be a part of the team and on this call with all of you.
Well, thanks for joining, guys. Charlie, just so everybody's aware, and I'll push out the report for anybody to download. This is covering everything in the month of June, correct?
Yes, all of this data, I think the Friday, everything up to June 30th. So that the Friday before everybody had fun on July 4th. Yeah, I think covers about 9 year over year, roughly about 880,000 beds, give or take 890,000 beds year over year. And roughly about 271 markets. So a large sample set here to talk through. But I mean, last handful of weeks, I think most of these Most groups will start that turn process here in the next 3 or 4 weeks, with move-outs commencing. The West being a little later, as you can see the numbers relatively reflecting there. But across the board, pre-lease is still ahead. Again, we can't stay ahead 10% forever. So the numbers have gotten a little closer together, but the rent growth still remains there above 10%, which is amazing. If you look here, the Southwest and the Southeast are stealing the thunder. Again, the largest concentration of beds between the 5 regions that we're covering here. You can still see the Southwest. That's a lot of your Texas, Arizona markets are doing exceptionally well. As we continue along here, Wes, we look at this. How do I go to the next slide?
I could do that. Really quick, as I'm doing that, wanted to throw out to these folks. Is there any particular region that kind of outperformed your expectations or didn't live up to your expectations?
So for us at Peak, and based on these numbers, makes me feel a whole lot better. But the Northeast is still performing strong, just slower velocity than we saw over the last couple of years, like specifically like Syracuse, Connecticut, places that, we traditionally always deliver 100% occupancy. I still expect we'll get there, but the velocity is taking a different curve this year. So it's thrown us a little bit of a curveball, but that's probably the one that sticks out the most to me. Excuse me.
And I would say for Price Company, the one that sticks out most for me is the Southwest region, which we do have a heavy focus in Texas. As we know, over the pandemic, Texas suffered mightily, especially UT, with their enrollment and vacancy rates were significantly higher for a couple of years as a result of the COVID pandemic. We've seen some real stabilization on the I-35 corridor down from Austin all the way through San Marcos and into San Antonio, and that has been a really big turnaround for our portfolio. One of the comments in the chat just asked to mention pre-lease velocity as well, and our portfolio as an average is right at 95, and just even with last year as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say really the Southeast region and the Southwest region really hit it out of the park this year. Definitely exceeded our expectations. We were in the 100% mark for some of our properties by December, which was really exciting and was a huge win for us. So very happy about that. Our portfolio, I don't think I mentioned it, but our portfolio right now is sitting a little bit over 80%. We're just waiting for our Chicago properties, and then we'll be more so in the 90s. But we're really happy with our performance so far, and we really are definitely monitoring everything as changes happen, but really very happy with how our Southeast and Southwest properties performed this year. I think it's pretty standard that the West Coast can kind of be sometimes on the slower side, but we're definitely monitoring everything and putting in our resources where they're needed.
Oh, great. Charlie, did you want to hit on occupancy, or you want me to go on to rents?
Yeah, I think with this time, again, there's a little bit of a dip depending on some of the early move outs and whatnot. So the numbers may not be as, I think the high for the year was closer to 94, 94.25. We expect, if we're numbers a little bit above that for the end of the year, we'll see how things shake out. We normally will call that mid-September, given the move-in times a little bit delayed there on the West Coast in markets like Seattle and Eugene. So I'd expect the industry to be above where it ended up last year. I think that the high of that number again was about 94 and a quarter. But expect again that velocity to kind of trickle through it. We've got 9% between now and 9% between 86 and 95. So normally those last little bits of leases come through there. But really the story is on the rent growth side, which has been consistently in that double-digit range. I think the peak in February was roughly about 12.5% from a year-over-year perspective. But what's crazy to see is the high velocity, as we talked about the Southwest and the Southeast regions, coupled with that rent growth. So 12.6% in the Southwest, 12.1% in the Southeast, respectively. But if we're thinking how that velocity puts into effect, or ties and correlates to the rent growth here. I mean, if they're still outperforming, it shows that we haven't hit that pinnacle of, I guess, where the rent growth can go. So it gives some strong sentiments to the strong fundamentals in the runway that's still in student housing from a rent growth perspective for next year. Given the fact that markets are still ahead and outperforming last year, and they're already up on average 12.6, 12.1%. For the Southwest, for the Southeast, Northeast, and Midwest, again, you're still positive. It's just the higher rates per bed there in the Northeast. It's harder to quantify. A $50 increase in the Northeast is a little less from a weighted average perspective over there in the Southeast, Southwest. So positive stuff.
So curious with the panel, what are your predictions? You think this will continue into next season?
Yeah, so the data shows obviously we've had a record or a banner year for both occupancies and rent growth, which is really unprecedented for the space, and we're obviously really excited about going into this fall. I really think it drills down to being more market specific and even sub-market specific. We've got some assets that are in a sub-market that's main pedestrian core directly across the street from campus, and some value add, mid B, low B class assets that might be a little bit more challenged in some different sub-markets as well. So I would say we're cautiously optimistic that we'll see the rent growth continue into next year. Again, market specific and sub-market specific, depending on what the specific business plan calls for an asset. Obviously, if there's some value add opportunity there, with some unit renovations, we'll be able to push rent some more in some of those B class, low A class properties that are not pedestrian to campus. One thing that I think is really going to help us in this space tremendously this year, as we're looking forward into the 24-25 academic year, is the fact that we had such large rent gaps from where we started to where we finished. Right. That'll give us a great opportunity to pick up the floor on where we start this year, since so many students signed at a higher premium rate for 23-24. So picking up that floor quite a bit and starting at a $50 to $75 premium from where we started last year will help us get another 2 to 3%, hopefully, on top of the organic rent growth.
So I'll jump in. I agree. I'm cautiously optimistic. We can't stay this way forever. So we're just trying to eat while we can over on the peak side of things. So I totally agree with everything Mike said about it being supermarket specific. I think we'll see, double digits again next year where we can get them. We are also raising our floors, but what we're also doing is taking a look at how our rent increases for next year might address or impact our retention rates, and trying to build marketing strategies that do not rely on 35% renewal. If we know that we're coming out of the gates in the middle of where we're ending this year, we just are going to go ahead and plan to not renew as many people so that we can shift our focus earlier on driving leads and making sure that we're getting all the new lease traffic that we need. Okay. Again, I'm super optimistic, even just for this last, 8 weeks of our leasing season, to get to 97 or high 90s in the peak portfolio. In the last 4 weeks drove over 10,000 new leads across our portfolio. So we know people are still leasing and looking. Makes me feel much better as we plan for next year, but I don't know that we'll continue to get, 10% across the industry past next year.
Yeah. Real quick question on how you guys are kind of ending out this season. I'm sure you've got a lot of properties that are, they've hit that 95%. I know those managers want to get to 100% at peak so they can go on their cruise next year.
Yes, Diamond Club.
Are you guys using any different promotions or closing tools or anything?
Yeah, where we need it, not every property needs it. The good news is when you get up to 95, you end up getting a lot of the work done for you through referrals and just people trying to fill and find their roommates. And so we have, limited availability at those properties, really unique roommate matching situations at most of them. And so it makes it you have to be a little bit more selective. You can't just, lease to everybody that comes in because you might not be able to meet their needs. So it might take a little bit longer. We're staying steady, in Louisiana, for example, we've got 13 spots left, onesies in 4 bedrooms, and we know it'll take a little bit longer to fill those, but we know we'll get to 100%. I think for the properties that are in the 70s, 80s, that's where our kind of last effort. The good news is that, across our portfolio, we are on target with our rent growth plans and our budgets. And so we have that savings and that cushion in our concession dollars to be able to get a little bit more creative if we need to. There are a handful of markets like in Lubbock where we're seeing, the demand should be there and it's just painfully slow. So trying to be creative with our inducements and our promotions, but not give away more than we have to and find that balance. So I don't know if anybody has ideas in the chat, but I'd love to hear them. So drop them in there about Lubbock specifically.
Alyssa, any other predictions before we go on?
No, I would agree. I think, the biggest thing for us too is really pushing rate growth while we can. And that's what Book and Ladder has done this entire year. I know everybody really has. I do believe that, the bubble might pop per se, but we are just really monitoring everything as much as possible. Those properties that hit those high percentage rates, we were able to hit really great rent growth there. And then, the properties that we have that maybe are in the 70s or 80s, we are, like Ashley said, able to pivot a little bit right now because, we pushed a higher rate growth. And I would agree, we probably won't have, potential, all of the renewals. We may have to fish a little bit harder for new leads next year just because our rates have gone up so high. But at the same time, we're all setting the tone that those are what the rates are. And I think we'll be able to push it a little bit further, not too much further, but for this upcoming year, just a little bit further.
Gotcha. Charlie, anything on the floor plan?
No, I mean, really, from what I've seen, it's, as Ashley mentioned, it's like, hey, we got to put a couple people in a 4. And I see that as kind of a trend just because there's so many of them. But as we look at kind of where I would say the velocity that we kind of can expect for the next little bit. I mean, we're about a point ahead for round numbers there. You can see August ended up last year roughly about 90%. Again, that's I think we pulled this chart together, Wes, for that thing on the second.
Yeah.
That would be the second week of August, was in that 89.5% range. So the velocity is there. I know with the transition in summertime, it's definitely slow, and talking with a lot of our clients, it's like pulling teeth in some situations. The demand numbers say that those students are there, but I think with the last minute decisions and again, trying to fill those last spots, I would imagine, again, based on just the past performance, that velocity is there. It's not a COVID situation. We're past that. So would expect that those numbers to continue to push. Again, probably another 8 to 9% there to expect across the nation just for those last minute, again, college decisions, changes, finding roommates, everything in between.
I really love this graph that you put together, and it was, and hopefully we can put this in the stack moving forward. And this is what I love about what you guys are doing at College House, because we've missed this, with our within our industry prior to you guys coming on board, and so it's great being able to look at this trending information now year over year. But what you're seeing here, folks, I was at a College Pads, their off-campus housing summit that they did earlier this week in Atlanta. I was presenting to them, and Charlie's chief operating officer, Lenny, was there as well. And we were kind of presenting some of this data to the housing administrators who were, curious about what was going on off campus throughout the country on a regional basis. And, we knew the velocity was, happening earlier and earlier. The high velocity, but it's crazy because you can clearly see here, especially over there in the other chart, you could see where 2020 and before, we would hit that from a national average standpoint, we would hit that 50% mark, sometime in April, late March. We hit it the first week of February this year, and that's just getting earlier and earlier. So I wanted to really ask the panel, how's that impacting the conversations you guys are having when you're talking about marketing budgets and renewals. I know folks are starting renewals very early. Some are even, doing multi-year leases. So how is this increase in velocity over the past 2 years making you think about next year?
Yeah, we've been really trying over the last couple years and continuing into the next lease up, trying to capitalize on the change behavior that we're seeing with our customers. We ended February at 61% pre-lease, which for peak has not happened. And that was a dream going into the back half of the spring semester, having really strong velocity out of the gate. And so we're trying to recreate that magic and just continue backing up when we start and do that a little bit earlier. So we do have some markets where we are starting to talk about renewals as part of our move-in communication. There will definitely be some properties in our portfolio that have like a renewal section in their move-in day experience, and really just more of a focus on lead gen and new leasing earlier as well. So we're trying to come out of the gates. We have already started in some markets running, dual campaigns where we're targeting through our digital advertising for next fall and this fall. So just starting all of that much earlier to make this hopefully a permanent stick. This velocity, I know all of us are just so happy to not have as stressful of a summer trying to get those last few leases. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I think being proactive is the best way to do it. So if you can have those conversations, we're owner operated, so it's nice because we can have those in-house conversations and we can get everything done, fairly quickly. But obviously with your clients, those conversations, wanting to have them earlier so you guys can be prepared is definitely important. And I think because year over year it is, the pre-lease numbers we're seeing numbers like in the 60% by February, which is crazy. And I think that is just important that if you're proactive and you can get everything done ahead of time, that, you can really have the time to push out all your advertising and push it out to everyone so you can get those qualified leads and then close them.
Yeah, and for us, just looking back, we were just a hair over 72% pre-lease at the end of February as a portfolio on average for our same store portfolio. So a little bit above that 50%. And obviously that's created a little bit more urgency on our side internally to start having internal discussions about rate and occupancy guidances and business plans for fall 2024, and having those discussions earlier with our JV partners and clients on the third party side, just to really make sure we're out on the forefront, on both the business plan for how we're going to market the property, what that rate structure should look like. We're working on our leasing ladders prior to turn, so we're ready to launch immediately after move-in day. So we're excited for another year ahead, and really doing as much prep work on the earlier side this time to get ahead of that curve, because we know it's going to be turn and then moving right into leasing.
So when I was at that summit on Tuesday, we were presenting this to the housing administrators, and some of them were real estate directors and auxiliary services folks. But we got on the topic, and Chris Ancazer from Pierce was the one that was really speaking to it about housing fairs and how, in her flagship markets right now, having a housing fair in February or March, it's worthless to them as far as for signing leases for for the coming year, because they're already leased up. I'm just kind of curious, what are you guys thinking about housing fairs, going into this next year? And, are there things that you would, like to see as far as how they're promoted or the timing of them going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a big discussion on the sales and marketing team at Peak. We saw the same thing that Pierce saw, where normally we could count on a housing fair in the flagship markets to be really large double-digit leasing weeks for us. Really, probably over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, just because of the residual effects. And that just didn't happen. We did see, a little bump in leasing velocity, but not to the extent that we were investing in the housing fairs. And so I do encourage, anybody, if there is anybody on the call that has the ability to influence the timing of housing fairs, moving them to the fall, and really focusing on how are you going to get students there. We at least were able to pivot and add like a housing fair marketing strategy to our properties that we're investing a lot in, just being able to attend the housing fair. Also, if your property, we're at some markets, and hopefully I don't freak any of our vendor partners out, but we are looking at potentially diverting those funds for housing fairs to digital campaigns or just other events that hit at the right time for brand awareness. We think we might get a little bit more out of those investments. So,
yeah, I think also another thing is, the fall housing fairs are always the best because that's when the students are the most excited because they just started their school year and those different things. But it really is the market specific. Some markets, like the Austin market, the housing fair there is huge. However, it's not, the housing fairs aren't always big in every single market. So I think really just knowing your market and knowing which ones, which universities have the housing fairs that are really worth the money because they are quite expensive. And then also taking it a step further and having the conversations potentially with the university and the people that are in charge of the housing fairs, like how much advertising are you guys doing to the students to get this out there? Because we are spending a ton of money and we want it to be beneficial for all of us. So, hey, are you sending out a lot of emails? Are you texting them? Or, what's the messaging to the students? Because we want it to be successful for you, but we also want it to be successful for us. So I think it's really knowing your market, having those conversations, even though it might be a little awkward, like, hey, how many email blasts are you sending to the students about this? But in reality, it helps us in the long run too. And I agree with Ashley. If you can allocate money in a different direction for marketing and, going out and, doing guerrilla marketing, which still is something that definitely works, you might get more bang for your buck because sometimes the housing fairs in the most recent years haven't been as lucrative as they used to be in past years. And I think it's just people are living in a digital world and they don't exactly want to leave their house to go to a housing fair. The students have other things going on. So there's so many different factors, but I think it's definitely market specific on if the housing fair is going to be something that you should put money into or put it somewhere else.
Guys, I echo those exact same comments. I think, along with the COVID pandemic, we've sort of seen housing fairs go by the wayside. It's certainly not the same as what it was, when I was in school and coming up through, 2015 through 2020. It certainly has changed the game a little bit. We are living in a more digital and virtual world. It's interesting. I've actually seen a university coming out with a digital virtual housing fair this upcoming Monday for students that are coming off the wait list for on-campus housing. So they're still running housing fairs, but we've even seen some universities go virtual for those housing fair options as well. So to piggyback off of both Ashley and Alyssa, we are reallocating funds to go more digital, focusing more heavily on ad space on Google, focusing more heavily on geofencing campaigns, targeting specific areas on campus that are going to get us the most exposure. And, if there is a housing fair on campus in the spring, we might not, we'll still be in attendance, but we're not going to, spend $2,000-$3,000 on the setup and have a ton of promo. And it's really just for some additional exposure in the spring, since most of our assets are pretty well along with their pre-lease.
Right. Guys, I want to skip ahead because I've got to get to our next segment with Ted. And I'm going to X out the question I had on development, but we talked a little bit about this particular slide where we're talking about the difference in growth between the different floor plans. And Ashley, we talked a little bit about a lesson you learned on the twos versus, because I look at this and I'm like, the 4 bedrooms having more of an increase in the 2, just something seemed wrong with that to me. And you actually had some pretty good insight. So tell us about that lesson you learned.
Yeah, I think Mike and I agree on this. It's really just because there's more product. You've got more opportunity to break your rates up and grow in a little more kind of slow and steady, just because you have so many 4 bedrooms out there. 2 bedrooms, for most of the markets that we're in are hot commodities. And so they go a little bit faster. And for us, the lesson that I had shared with the group yesterday was just making sure that our managers know, what is the next tier, maybe the 2 tiers after that, and making sure that they feel empowered. They do not have to fill up their tiers before they move to the next one, especially if velocity is high, your office is busy, you're getting a lot of leads. Let's not wait to push those rates. We want to make sure we're not leaving any money on the table, which I think, the others on the panel would agree with that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I can speak on a few of our properties that my teams were great. They understood the assignment that we wanted to have rate growth, and they really pushed past tiers astronomically. And now we're almost at 100% at a few of those properties that we, went way past different tiers. So we're just waiting on maybe like 2 beds left, 2 or 3 beds. And it's because we really did push back the tiers. So as far as we could and pushed the limits. So I think definitely if you tell your teams like, hey, this is the goal. I know it seems scary to increase the rates when you guys are getting some good traction, but honestly, in the long run, it'll be worth it. You'll have more money for the property. There's all of these different things that'll make the world go round. So I definitely think don't be afraid to push the rates if you're seeing the traction.
Great.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Back to Ashley's point. I mean, there's just so many more 4-bedroom units in the space. I mean, purpose-built student housing is generally, 4 bedrooms. So.
Yeah.
All right, I've got to move along because we've got to get to the next one. Charlie, as we're going out here, and I want to go ahead and start bringing Ted on. First of all, Mike, Alyssa, Ashley, thanks so much for being a part of this. But Charlie, as they're leaving, I'm bringing Ted back on. Talk about this pipeline for a little bit. Do you think this is going to we're going to see more increases specifically for 25 or 26 at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen a couple new ones announced for 25. I think the capital markets are challenging for the development, and the costs are still high. So, with the dip in beds for next year, I mean, we saw a lot of 24s that were pushed to 25 well ahead of time. Things that penciled 18 months ago may not in the current world, but I think the developers primarily are getting more aggressive and more creative and getting these deals done. So I would imagine there's going to be an uptick latter half of 26, 27, 25, maybe a handful more, but yeah, hard to throw it up that quick to change those numbers very drastically.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us today and giving us your insight, and good luck with Turn and finishing out the season, and we'll talk to you on the flip side.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Ted, hope you're doing well.
I am. Thank you.
Hey, before I go into an introduction, I want to really quick just recognize a couple of new members to the ShopTalk Leadership Committee. This is the 6 folks who will be leading me in this endeavor of coming up with topics for ShopTalk, and just wanted to recognize a few of them. Of course, Casey and Adam are staying on board, and you recently added Laura Formica from Core Spaces, Jessica Dellis from Hugo, and Jason Fort from Asset, and then Brian Shelengoski actually stepped on a couple of months ago to take over for Jen Frazier as she was going to into another role at Graystar. And I want to send a big thank you out to Julie Bonin and Slaw Brandon for serving this past year on the board. And thanks for all that you guys do. All right, let's talk about property insurance and casualty. And all the things that are scaring everybody these days when it comes to owning these assets. Ted, when I was meeting with the leadership committee earlier in the spring, I was asking them what they wanted to hear about this summer, and everybody said property and casualty insurance is something that is just a really hot topic, and just even getting a better understanding of what's happening in that marketplace is something that they really wanted to get a little bit more of insight to. And I said, okay, who do I need to talk to? and your name came up. So thanks so much for cutting some time out to go through this. And with that being said, I'll let you introduce yourself and a little bit about what Lockton does.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be asked to be a part of this. And it used to be when we got to the insurance section and webinars that, you saw about 40% of the people drop off. And now a lot of people are staying on. So, yeah, it continues to be an issue. And I look forward to addressing some of the questions. In terms of myself, so I'm president with Lockton Companies. I'm also vice chair of our global real estate practice. And a Lockton partner. I've been with the firm for about 16 years, and I've seen it grow significantly in that time. Lockton, we're the largest privately held brokerage firm in the world, and brokerage being the key point. I am not an insurance company executive. I am a brokerage executive, so I don't like delivering the bad news to our clients just as much as they don't like receiving it. But our company's been producer-led, producer-governed since its existence, and that means that the people that are closest to the clients and are responsible for client acquisition and retention are the ones that are structuring the investments and guiding the investment strategies for the firm. And so our multifamily practice and therefore student practice is really a great example of that. About 20 years ago, we really chose to focus on multifamily housing because it was underserved from a brokerage standpoint and misunderstood from a insurance company standpoint or market standpoint. And the same occurred when we started to focus on student housing about 10 years ago. Underserved, misunderstood. And in that time, we've grown significantly. We're the largest multifamily practice in the country and have a very significant student housing client base.
Oh, great. Well, everything with student housing is based on an academic cycle. And there's obviously a market cycle to the insurance industry as well. And I really think that's kind of where we need to start at, because I don't think everybody has a complete grasp on how that cycle impacts different things throughout the year. So if you could start with that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, you bet. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of the annual market cycle, but then also just the anatomy of an insurance market cycle. And that'll bring, I think, greater context to some of the, continued discussion. But so on an annual basis, you have a couple. Well, first, let me start with what are the three major factors that affect insurance company profitability. So it's losses. So you have attritional losses, which are fires or flood, things like that. Then you have cat losses, and those are hurricanes, it's earthquake, it's large, the Texas freezes, those types of things. Then you have reinsurance. And reinsurance, think of reinsurance kind of like the Fed. It really dictates the cost of capital for insurance companies. So all insurance companies reinsure their risk. And so you have treaty reinsurance, you have facultative reinsurance. Treaty reinsurance is the big one where they will take a large portion of their book of business, particularly cat driven, and they will reinsure that. So then the last factor is interest rates, because all these companies, they invest their surplus and their capital, and mostly in long-term bonds, and that has been very low returns until recently, which is hopefully going to help things. But I'll start with reinsurance, kind of how that works on an annual basis. So, as I said before, reinsurance is going to dictate the cost of capital for and the ability to extend capacity for insurance companies, and that ultimately trickles down to the property layers that our clients buy. And so there are two major, really one major, but two big treaty reinsurance cycles. So the first one is January 1st. So that's the big one as we move into the second quarter of the year, or sorry, fourth quarter of the year. That's when all these insurance companies are trying to understand how reinsurance is going to be priced. This last year, we saw the largest strip of capacity from a reinsurance standpoint, and also the largest increase in pricing and retention that we had seen in history. So, for loss-prone industries like multifamily housing, student housing, certainly, that's they're going to, those clients are going to feel the most, the biggest impact of that across the country. So as you move through the year, then you have hurricane season that starts, July, goes through November. That's when everybody just kind of grips the table and goes, okay, what's going to happen for, the next few months. And, if you look at the last 6 years, we've had the most frequency of hurricanes that we've had in history. And when you combine that with population growth, I thought it was really interesting looking at rent growth in the Southeast and Texas on some of those slides, and looking at it from my perspective and going, yep, well, that's where hurricanes are hitting, and we've had some of the worst losses, and so it's a really interesting kind of issue right now between the insurance market and the student housing market. But we've also had freezes, convective storm, earthquake fits into CAT and those treaty renewals, and then the interest rates, as I talked about before. But all that leads to a combined ratio for insurance companies. And so for property specifically, a combined ratio over 100% means that the carriers have not been profitable. So over the last 4 years, for property, specifically for real estate, they've been over 100%. So they have not been making money. And so that's kind of led to, a lot of what we're talking about now. But if you look at where we are in this insurance market cycle, so until about 5 or 6 years ago, pricing had pretty much cascaded. It was at the lowest points that it had ever been, and we hadn't had any really major hurricanes or large frequency of hurricanes over that time. So carriers were really pricing more for fire risk, for attritional losses, than they really were for large cat losses. It had become very competitive. And so then you go into this latest climate pattern, weather pattern, whatever you want to refer to it as, and you have year over year over year of large cat losses. And so when you have that, you end up with unprofitable situation for these carriers, and you have these rising rates. So what typically happens with a market cycle is you see those rates rise, you see capacity tighten, and your carriers don't have as much to extend, and at some point they become profitable. When that happens, things stabilize, then competition comes into the mix because they know they can make money, and that's when you start to see rates come down again. So where are we right now? We're right at that inflection point where, okay, this is an unsustainable pattern right now of rising rates, constriction, and capacity. And so we're going to, it all is going to hinge on what happens during this next hurricane season, and whether or not we're profitable there. So I think, carriers are desperate for profit. And, for example, last couple of years, we've seen a 60% reduction in cat capacity. Yeah. They can't extend it, and they've got to be profitable at some point. And this year was really kind of that last, in my opinion, that last, the extreme measures that they need to take to be profitable.
Gotcha. That's a little scary. Well, hey, let's talk about property and casualty a little bit, and just any changes in requirements that are coming, any guidance on valuations. And then we had a we also had a Shop Talk segment last month on ESG, and at the core of it, ESG is really risk management itself. And so, just kind of wondering, with some of the initiatives, ESG initiatives, are there some considerations that you guys are having to build into your underwriting as well for that? So, I know that's kind of 3 questions in one, but I'll hand it over to you now.
Yeah, I'll start with the last one there in terms of ESG. So because of really the turbulent market cycle that we're in, ESG has not really bubbled up as an important part of underwriting. It's one of those things that when you start to peel back the layers on a specific risk, it is the firms that have a smart ESG strategy, that starts to come forward, but it hasn't become, I think it will be, but it hasn't become a major part of the underwriting.
Okay.
So guidance on valuations. So valuations, the reason why we've seen an escalation in valuations is, or scrutiny on valuations is because every time we have a large hurricane like Ian, or we have large catastrophic losses elsewhere, the last several years, the cost to rebuild has been higher than the reported values, and so that's another issue for the carriers. It's led to some unprofitable situations for them, and so they're continuing to push and scrutinize values, and they're doing it because construction costs have been rising. And so that's guidance there. I can talk about it in a little bit in terms of blocking and tackling for companies, but it's make sure that you're examining it early and understanding how you're viewed by the insurance companies related to valuations. So changes in requirements. Those there's changes on the insurance company side, and then there's requirements and from lenders, from investors, and there's a major disconnect in a lot of this, and it's something we've been working heavily on. We have groups that where we're pulling together developers, governments, and state governments and lenders, trying to really get everybody to understand the interconnection there. Because on the one hand, you have
I still see it.
Okay. On the one hand, you have lenders who are saying, "Oh my gosh, well, we're having a lot of hurricanes, we're having a lot of losses. Well, let's make sure we're over insuring." And then on the other hand, with the insurance companies, they're going, "Okay, we're having a lot of hurricanes, a lot of losses. Well, we're stripping out capacity, and we don't have as much to offer." So they want to increase rates, and there isn't capacity to, or they want to increase limits over here, and there isn't much capacity to address over there. So we've got to level that out. The insurance companies are, as I mentioned before, we've seen a 60% reduction in cat capacity. So they don't have as much to extend. The carriers that are willing to write catastrophic risk has shrunken from about 15 carriers to about 5. So it's a supply and demand issue. Demand is increasing, and the supply has shrunk. So what you're seeing there is increased retentions, lower limits. You're seeing different language as it relates to replacement costs. You're seeing margin clauses, those types of things go on.
Gotcha. Well, to move away from property and casualty, because you guys do a lot more than than just that for student housing. What if I'm an owner, either looking to make a switch or just reevaluating risk management? What are some other solutions that you would basically urge them to look at?
Yeah, and I want to be mindful of time. I'll try and speed through this, but I really break this down into what are the blocking and tackling things that owners and operators should be looking at. and then what are the strategic, or what are the strategies that can help them long term. So, like with the blocking and tackling, data drives all of the underwriting, and relationships attract carriers to the table. So making sure that all clients understand how they look in the marketplace. So what type of exposure they have, why they would be priced a certain way, their losses, how they benchmark against other similar asset types or their competitors and peers. Examining retentions early, making sure that you understand that there's going to be a break point. You don't want to take too much retention and not get credit for it, but you don't want to try and fight for a low retention, be penalized for it. Looking at secondary characteristics on properties. So things like hurricane shutters or toenail roofs or all those different things. That makes a big difference in renewals. Then also how you model from a CAT standpoint, from a loss standpoint, from a crime score standpoint, and then meeting with underwriters. That that relationship is really important. We always see a strong return when our clients are meeting with key underwriters and telling their story themselves. In terms of larger strategic, big picture initiatives that can help. So risk finance, captives are a part of risk finance, but a captive doesn't necessarily, isn't all risk finance. So understanding risk finance mechanisms within insurance programs is really important. So, if you can take a certain amount of your losses and insure those yourself, but cap that most out of pocket, that's usually going to help you. You're going to put yourself in partnership with those with the carriers. But then captives can be a great long-term strategy for student housing firms to really level off, because what everybody's trying to achieve is cost certainty for whatever their hold is, right? If somebody has a 5-7 year hold, they just don't they want to underwrite to something that's going to provide cost certainty rather than are we going to continue to have 20%, 30% year-over-year increases. So captives can they can help with profitability on things like renters insurance, tenant legal liability, but that can also help capitalize a captive that then can participate in an insurance program. That could be on the liability side, that could be on the work comp side, that could be in a property tower, depending on what's going to lower costs overall and help with leveling out the pricing. And then go ahead.
Real quick on captives, what size does a portfolio need to be in order to consider that as an option?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think scale is important, but if somebody's looking to start, they're called micro captives or 831B captives. They can start a captive even if they have just 3,000-4,000 beds, because they can use that to put a renter's insurance program together. Once you start talking about larger participation in the insurance program, you're going to need to be probably 10,000, 15,000 beds and above before you're really starting to generate the economies of scale that can provide capitalization for a captive to participate in some of those layers. Good question, though.
Gotcha. Yeah. You were about to say one other thing, but I know we're also past time. So if you need to get on, we can do that.
I'm fine for now. I can hit on a couple other quick topics. In terms of strategies, multi-line carrier relationships are important. So a lot of these carriers, if they're going to participate in a property program and they can participate in the liability and especially in the work comp, that you can attract more capacity that way. Work comp is one of the most profitable lines of coverage in the insurance industry. Liability has seen, an increase, and it has stabilized. So people are making money there. So that can certainly help. But one of the other things that we've seen that it can come up across our client base is there's been a disconnect similar to, the lenders and investors in the marketplace. Is you have different people running risk management in firms. Some have formal risk managers. Asset management sometimes does it. Sometimes it's finance, whatever, tends to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's sometimes a disconnect between acquisitions. And so making sure that you have a smart strategy for the Southeast, for Texas, as it relates to acquisitions, because a lot of these carriers they won't release a quote until you're under LOI, because if they put a quote out, that means they're tying up that capacity until that it's bound. And so a lot of these carriers, because they don't have much capacity, don't want to tie things up until they have certainty. So making sure that the acquisitions teams and risk management are talking to one another, say, okay, let's provide as accurate of an estimate as possible, so data driven, but accurate estimate as possible when we're putting our offer out. Then as we move into that stage where we're under contract, then we can get that formalized quote. That's incredibly important, because sometimes the acquisitions will use what's in the O&M to benchmark their insurance rates, and I can tell you most of them are going to be inaccurate. They're going to be lower. They're going to be based upon last year's rates, whatever that might be, and you need to make some educated assessment of where the rates are going to be.
Gotcha. Well, I put a message or a chat out earlier to see if there were any other questions, and it doesn't look like anybody's put anything in. One question I've got for you, though, that just kind of happened to me recently, going into a sale of a property for a client, and about, let's call it 35 days before close, we had a tornado claim. Not significant damage, but enough that it made sense to obviously file the claim. How we got through that, everything worked out fine. I'm just curious, from a standpoint, had that been 15 days later, there's no way we could have got that done before the sale of the property. Have you ran into that situation, and does it postpone the closing? Is there is there any kind of protocol in place as far as how to handle that?
Yeah, so in terms of, you get a quote here, you have a loss here, you're closing over here, right? Yeah. It happens.
Does it postpone the closing when it happens like that, or?
It shouldn't, right? Once you have that quote, the carriers can pull out, but a lot of times that loss is going to be on the owner's policy, right? The current owner's policy, not the new policy. So it could spook carriers, but 9 times out of 10, they shouldn't pull their quote because of a loss that occurred on someone else's property. They may say, hey, look, we might need to, examine the rates here, but, most of the time it shouldn't. If it does, sometimes that can postpone closing.
Yeah.
What postpones closing more often than not is if you have a heavy cat property, and the underwriting now takes so long that a lot of times you're not getting a quote until 10 days prior. Is a lot of times that's wonderful. Sometimes it's 2, 3. Sometimes it's the day before the closing happens. And occasionally, you'll have carriers that can't get the quote out in time for closing, that can postpone it. But most of the time, you'll know about that, beforehand. So it's not an emergency postponement.
Yeah. I was on the seller side of that transaction. It was one of those things of, okay, we know we've got enough time to get this done, get everything paid out. Because obviously when the property sells, that, you know, that it's no longer in their name at that point. So it was just one of those things where it's just been curious, and, you know, the things that I've been thinking about of, okay, what if that did happen 10 days before the closing? You know, is that something that would have to put it off, put the closing off until, you know, it took us, I think it took us right at 10 days to finally get somebody out to the location, because, you know, the insurance agents were busy all over, you know, the state. It took them a while to get out there and actually finish their investigation. So,
and there's some things that sellers can do contractually related to those claims. You know, a lot of when they do happen and it's closer, you know, we'll work with them to come up with contractual wording that, you know, says we will be responsible for the settlement of this claim, you know, even post close, and you know, that tends to satisfy buyers.
Well, again, Ted, thanks so much for carving out some time to speak with us today. And are you going to be in Vegas for the NMHC conference?
Yes, I absolutely will.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing you there. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, Lockton.com.
Yeah, ted.brown@lockton.com is my email. And we've got a great team. Happy to be a resource for any and all.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Wes. I appreciate being here. Hopefully it was helpful.
Thanks. Well, guys, as we said earlier, for those that have stood on till 12 minutes past the hour, I appreciate it. As we said earlier, we will not be doing a shop talk in August, so that everybody's focused on turn. And the next one is currently penciled in for Thursday, September 14th. But we will send out an email to everybody letting them know once that has been once that has become the final date for that. But that's what we've got penciled in so far. And again, if you enjoyed this and it's brought you some value, I ask you to please share Shop Talk with your colleagues. They can go to shoptalk.info and register with their email address there, and they'll get all the email invites, calendar invites for our meeting each month. So thanks so much, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.